Morning class, long time no see. Mr. Minopi asked me to make a quick video for you guys, just kind of recapping the circulatory system and talking about maybe about the heart, the blood vessels, everything that's kind of going on in there. It might look a lot very similar to the work from last week, but just really recapping and trying to hammer home this unit. That way we all are on the same page, all right? So let's get started. The circulatory system, okay? So the circulatory system, we have our three main parts here at the top. We have our blood. We're going to talk about that first. We have blood vessels, and then the heart, in which we'll talk about the heart last, okay? So first things first, we're going to talk about our blood. Some people might think about, they might see these little red blood cells, but also it has something called white blood cells, which you might have heard of. And then at the bottom, we're going to talk about platelets. But so just to kind of break it down, the three major parts of blood, we have our red blood cells, which is imaged here, the very red image here. Its main function is to carry oxygen and food to the body's cells, okay? Let's go. So the biggest thing that red blood cells do, carrying oxygen and food, I don't have that here, to the rest of the body, right? We have white blood cells, which is here, and there's a bunch of different kinds of white blood cells. We have monocytes, eosinophils, basophils, lymphocytes, neutrophils. You don't need to know those names. You just need to know that white blood cells are there to fight infection. Each one of these different white blood cells has a different function when it comes to maybe a bacteria or a virus. Maybe it gets into your body. And what happens then is the white blood cells does its job and it fights whatever might be in your body that's not supposed to be there, okay? And then we have these things called platelets, which if you look at this image at the very bottom of the screen here, it's not these little red dots. Those are red blood cells. Rather, the little purple dots that these arrows are pointing to, there's one up here as well and one way up here. These are called platelets. And platelets are there to clot blood when blood vessels are damaged. So if you ever get a cut or a scrape, you've fallen off your bike, what have you, and you scrape your elbow, and after maybe an hour, even less, if it was bleeding, it stopped bleeding, right? And if it wasn't for those platelets, it would keep bleeding and bleeding and bleeding until you were out of blood and you'd probably pass out. But platelets, what they do is they kind of all clump together, kind of like my fist here, and they block the blood from flowing out. So they all kind of clot together. That's what that word clot means here. I can find my cursor. If the word clot here means that they all kind of jumble up, get together, and then they block the blood from getting out, all right? So three major parts. We have our red blood cells, our white blood cells, and our platelets. And so what blood is really made of, so we have, like I said, we've talked about white blood cells, we've talked about red blood cells, there's also platelets in there, but the last thing we didn't talk about is something called plasma. The reason I have this picture here is because in this picture you have the red blood cells, which can always be seen not only as the red thing, but also the thing with the little dimple in it, right? So red blood cells are unique in the fact that there's a cell that doesn't have a nucleus. Rather, they're just packed full of something called hemoglobin, which is something that oxygen can attach onto. As you can see down here, so if we have the component of a red blood cell, so carry oxygen around the body, no nucleus means it makes space for oxygen. They're small and compact, and then they're very flexible, they fit into small spaces, and so made of hemoglobin, which is what I just said, or oxyhemoglobin, which is where the oxygen, when your blood goes through through all your lungs, the oxygen will attach to it, and then as it's carried through your body, once it gets to where it needs to go, the oxygen comes off. So that's red blood cells. White blood cells, like we talked about, they find and destroy something called pathogens, which is a virus, bacteria, anything that's in your body that can make you sick. They can kind of change shape. If you've ever seen an image of maybe a cell engulfing another cell, that could be a white blood cell eating a pathogen. And something here we call plasma. So like I said, we have this image here. You can see the red blood cells, you can see what I would probably call platelets, maybe white blood cells, but there's still a bunch of empty space in this picture, right? That's all plasma. Plasma is the liquid in your blood that moves the red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, it's what moves it through your veins, your arteries, your heart. It's the transport for those. It also contains platelets just in the plasma, but so just the thing to know is the plasma is the liquid in your blood. Okay? Okay. So moving on, so we've talked about blood, what blood is made of, but now we're going to talk about blood vessels. Blood vessels is what kind of transports your blood. It's like maybe if you think about a subway system. So if red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets are all the people in the subway system, the train car or the tube is what the tunnel is going to be the blood vessel, right? Moving through the tunnel, okay? And so, like I said, these are what carry blood around the body. There are three major kinds of blood vessels. You've probably heard of some of these. So we have arteries, veins, and capillaries, okay? And take a look at this diagram I have here. Especially look at where the lungs are, right? So you have all your blood, and we'll talk about each one of these in detail here in a moment. But if you take a look at this image here, we have the red area is where vessels transporting oxygenated blood. So oxygenated blood is blood that has oxygen in it, right? So notice that if you start at the lungs, what's coming out of the lungs on the right here? You can kind of see this arrow. What's coming out of the lungs is red blood, which is blood that has oxygen in it, right? So it goes out of your lungs, goes into the heart really quickly, only for a moment. And then the rest of the time, it's going through the rest of your body. These arteries are going down to maybe your liver, your stomach and intestines, your kidneys, whatever needs oxygen, it carries it down, and then it goes into this central area. These other purple areas here, these are going to be your capillaries. And then once it's kind of handed off that oxygen, it then leaves through into these bluer portions, goes back up to the heart. That heart pumps it back up into the lungs where it picks up more oxygen. That's that blue area. Those vessels transport deoxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood is blood that has no oxygen in it, right? So let's talk about these three different blood vessels. So arteries and their characteristics. Arteries, the red portion right here, the red portion, they have thick, really strong walls, and they're under high pressure. So they're kind of flying through the body. They're being pumped really tough because they're just in that moment, they're just getting pumped by the heart, and the heart pumps really tough. And so the second it pumps, it shoots through the rest of the body at a really high pressure. And so just to contain it, so if you have an image of a vein, it's really thick. And to contain that high pressure, the walls of the arteries have to be really thick so it doesn't burst out, right? And note that arteries are always carrying away, most 99% of the time are carrying blood away from the heart. So remember, A for artery, A for away. Okay? Mostly carry oxygenated blood. Yeah. Okay? Moving on, then we have veins. So if we're looking at this diagram again, we have our blue veins. Okay? For the most part, veins are carrying deoxygenated blood, except for this one instance here. We have the pulmonary artery, because it's more important. The arteries are, remember, carrying away, so the pulmonary artery is carrying it away up to the lungs. So most of the time, carrying deoxygenated blood, their walls aren't normally as thick because it's so far away from the heart. You know, after you've already gone through the body, you've already gone through the organs. Now you're kind of further away from the heart over here. So the pressure isn't as high because it's been a while since it's been pumped by that heart, right? So it's slowed down, it's gone through the organs, it's gone through a lot of traffic, right? And so the walls don't need to be as thick as you can kind of see here in this diagram I have here, because it's a much lower pressure. And it's so low that these veins have vein valves. And so these are here to keep the blood from going backwards in the vein. They'll close up, and then every time it gets a little push, it'll go forward, and then it closes up again, push forward, closes up again, just to keep the blood, like I say here, to keep it all moving in one direction. You don't want the blood going backwards, or else it wouldn't reach your heart, it wouldn't reach your lungs, you wouldn't have oxygen, it would just be a bad ordeal. Okay? So carry blood to the heart, mostly carrying deoxygenated blood, not as thick walled as arteries. They're under a lower pressure, and they have these valves. Okay? And the last thing we have here are capillaries, and I have another diagram here. capillaries are really, really small blood vessels. So what happens is if you have an artery coming down with oxygenated blood, and then you have an organ here maybe, so if I go back to the big picture, these are all going to be your capillaries, right? Maybe your kidney, your stomach, your liver, wherever needs oxygen, these capillaries kind of weave in throughout your arteries. I'm sorry, not your arteries, your organs, and they deliver the oxygenated blood. So they're really small, very narrow. They're only one cell thick. And this is where you have this gas exchange. So this is where that blood turns from oxygenated blood to deoxygenated blood. So it has oxygen to no oxygen, okay? That's what capillaries are. Really small blood vessels, one cell thick, where the gas exchange occurs. They also need to take away waste, right? They also must take away waste. So these organs and cells in those organs are producing waste, and it can't just sit there, right? You don't want to just sit in your own filth all the time. It needs to go away somewhere, right? So these capillaries pick up the waste and then take it up through the veins all the way out, okay? Last thing we have here, and all I have here is an image, is the heart. So you guys have seen this a lot already, but I just want to touch on it real quick because I have work for you today, and it's going to be drawing the heart again because you need to keep doing it. You'll get it down pat, right? It's pretty straightforward, except when you're looking at a heart diagram, usually it's mirrored, right? The left is on the right and the right is on the left. That's because it's taken from if you're looking at the body straight on, right? Because if you're looking at me, my right is your left is my right. So just think about it as it's always mirrored. So you have your left atrium. I always remember this because atriums usually in my mind are big open areas, right? And are usually above you. So atrium is above, A, above. Left atrium moving down into the left ventricle, the lower part. Same thing on the right side, right atrium up above, right ventricle, and then moving out into these different arteries and veins, right? So it's specifically on the left side, left ventricle moving into the left atrium moving into the left ventricle moves out through the aorta, which you've probably heard of, which is a vein or an artery, moving out through that, out to the rest of the body because it's carrying oxygenated blood. This is an artery. Artery means away. Notice this arrow away from the heart, out, 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 carrying oxygen to the rest of the body. Now on the right side, you see this bluer portion coming in into the heart, carrying it into the heart, not away, into. So we have the superior vena cava. Superior just means above, inferior vena cava, inferior meaning below, carrying it into the right side. Notice this is blue, meaning deoxygenated blood, carrying through the pulmonary artery. Arteries carrying away, again, another artery away. Pulmonary usually meaning to the lungs. Okay. Notice the only other thing that's really important here are these valves. These valves are here again. Same thing, same reason as the vein valves is to keep the blood from moving backwards. Okay. You don't need to know the names, just where they are. So they're in between the atrium and the ventricle on either side, and they're also outside of the different arteries to keep that from pumping backwards, okay? All right, so what you guys need to do for today, again, I need you guys to draw a diagram of the heart, use this diagram to do that, and then this is what you need to have. You need to have the valves just where they are. You don't necessarily need the names. The different chambers where the left and right atrium and ventricles are, both of the vena cavas, so superior and inferior, the aorta, and the pulmonary arteries. So that's this one right here. And then you also have pulmonary veins that are coming into the heart. That's what's carrying it into the left side, okay? The last thing I need you to do is I have some questions here on the right side of the screen. So in your copy, what is the liquid part of the blood? Name 3 different types of blood cells, so on and so forth, okay? If any questions, please let me or Mr. Minopi know, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much.